SISAP, Sistemas Aplicativos, presenta un nuevo episodio de su podcast Cyber Caffeine, un espacio para hablar sobre ciberseguridad, con invitados y profesionales destacados del sector. Comenzamos.
Buenos días, tardes a todos. Bienvenidos a otro episodio de Cyber Caffeine por medio de SISAP. Este episodio va a ser en inglés. So voy a moverme en inglés. Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of your podcast, Cyber Caffeine by CSAP. Today we're going to be talking about DFIR, providing some insights and lessons learned from different cases that we've worked at. Just really quick, Apollo Cyber is a DFIR arm of CSAP, providing services in both the U.S. and Latin America as well. So your host here, Edith Santos, I'm the CEO of Apollo Cyber, and also team members I have are Aric Asti and Byron Méndez. So I will allow each of them to introduce themselves. Aric?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Aric Asti. I've been in the industry for about 20 years. I've worked in various industries such as the U.S. military. I've worked in the U.S. academic sector and also in the private business sector. Certainly looking forward to sharing some insight with DFIR, some of the cases that we've seen, and most likely focusing on ransomware and network intrusion cases that we've investigated. Byron?
Yeah, hello. Thank you for having me, guys. I'm Byron Méndez. I'm a freshly introduced DFIR consultant. I have almost a year on experience. And yeah, as you, Aric, said, we, as Apollo, we focus on investigating ransomware cases, even some network intrusions. And yeah, I'm happy to be here, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad that we have both perspectives, right? One who's someone kind of new in the field, one who's had experience in the field. I've worked close to 20 years as well in the field, so things have changed. Technology changes, so that's the reason why I wanted to have Byron on this episode as well, to get his perspective. That's completely different than mine and Aric. So let's start with, what is DFIR? I think even some of the clients that we've come across lately, it's completely different, I think, when it comes to incident response out of a SOC consulting company. So I'll start with that. How do we define DFIR, Digital Forensics Incident Response?
Sure. So I'll start off with that. That's all right, Byron. So digital forensics and incident response, I'm reminded of a case where we kept citing DFIR during an investigation. The client spoke up and said, I'm a little embarrassed to ask, but what is digital forensics? What is DFIR? What does that mean? So typically, digital forensics and incident response goes hand in hand, but it is two different disciplines. Digital forensics is studying artifacts that are stored and presented in different systems, whether it's Windows, Linux, or Apple products. We call them artifacts that are from the operating system, and those artifacts tell us what happened on the computer, whether it's file write times or file access times, or in the event logs, users logging in or logging out, authentication, etc. There's a lot of information we can glean from that. That's typically the digital forensic side of DFIR. Incident response is really the practice of responding to cybersecurity incidents. So the difference between an event and an incident: event is something that occurs in your organization. An incident is something that violates your terms or violates the defined security of your organization. So incident response is responding to a most likely malicious event, which we call an incident, in your organization. But they're coupled together. So digital forensics tells us or informs what happened, how the threat actor got in, maybe what systems they touched, what systems they accessed, how they moved around, what tools they used. We use that information from digital forensics to assist on the incident response side. Byron, anything that I'm missing, or maybe a different way to say that?
No, I think you cover all what digital forensic and incident response is, but more from a technical perspective. Because when I explained it to my mom when I got the my role here on Apollo, I said, look, we're kind of like an ambulance that goes when a client has had an incident, and we try to recover them. We try to assist them and try to get back up and keep track of what they have been doing right now, and try to do it in the least amount of time that we can provide that help. So yeah, I think we are that kind of an ambulance, if we can say it like that, that goes and help different organizations or on getting back up after being affected by a incident. So yeah, I think that you described what we do pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the analogy. Certainly like an ambulance. Sorry, Edith, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So I like the analogy. It is like an ambulance, and also add it's almost similar to having the police or maybe a detective there as well who tells who tries to figure out what happened for the incident. Sorry to cut you off, Edith.
No, I wanted to even get your perspective a little bit more, Byron, especially out of a different region in Central America, right? So I can only think about some of the clients that I've spoken with recently who have no idea that this service exists, like a group of qualified individuals to help you recover, right? That hasn't been their perspective, at least in the experience I've had with some clients here in Central America. So do you get questions like that from, maybe, I know you're still at university, I know you're working with some other cells over in your country. So can you expand a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so a month ago, maybe, I did a conference on my university, and when I introduced myself as a DFIR consultant, they seemed kind of confused because here on Central America or even Latin America, it's not that common to know even what cybersecurity is. So being able to explain them as I did that analogy of like, oh, we are like kind of an ambulance that goes out there and try to help different organizations that have been affected by a incident. It was really helpful because it ties up an idea that they already know and applied it to a new concept that they have. Was really helpful. So yeah. And the other thing is that when different clients or organizations ask, what do we do? It's important to let them know that we are not just trying to know what happened or how did it happen. We want to help them to not be affected again with an incident like ransomware or MAC or network intrusion. So I think it's really important for us to let them know how critical this is in our job. Just not to try just to recover, is to learn about what happened and how can we improve our position as a organization in this cyber space. Yep.
I appreciate that very much, Byron, which kind of sort of leads me to another question. What exactly is the goal in an investigation? What phase pillars are we looking for? What phases are we trying to accomplish? What main items are we trying to accomplish when we investigate a case?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. No, sorry. I just wanted to say that, yeah, as I was just going to make an introduction of the three phases that we have, since I learned it from Aric, because he was my teacher and he introduced me to all of these DFIR. So what a better person to explain this to you guys that himself that he teach me all of this. So we have three phases, and yeah, back to you, Aric.
Okay, so we have the root point of compromise. And what we talk about with root point of compromise is how did the threat actor get into the environment? And this is really important. When you think about what question you would ask if you were in the organization and you suffered an incident, let's stick with ransomware. I want to pause for a second. Byron, you mentioned back, I just want to be clear that so incidents that we respond to typically are ransomware. That's the most popular. Byron had said BEC, which stands for BEC, and that's business email compromise. That could be a phishing email that went through, or it can lead to invalid financial transactions. It's typically what a BEC is, and the network intrusion. But back to the pillars. So when we talk about an incident, we're talking about ransomware. The pillars are root point of compromise, how the threat actor got in. That's often one of the first questions that the client wants to know. During investigation, that's actually one of the last things that we find because we're backtracking from the threat actor's actions. So first pillar, root point of compromise. Second is impact of malware. So what tools did the threat actor use? And this is really important because it forms TTPs, which are tactics, techniques, and procedures that the threat actor uses. A lot of times these are published beforehand from big name groups such as LockBit has a lot of TTPs, Black Basta, etc. All of the big groups, they're pretty much known how they operate within the organization. And then finally, the third pillar is unauthorized data access or exfiltration. So depending on where you live, because we're an international company, different laws apply. But we want to know, what did the threat actor access? Did they steal information? What information was stolen? And how important is that information to your organization? What's the risk level of that data? Now, typically the threat actor will tell you that they stole data. It's been our experience that they usually lie about how much data they have. Sometimes they provide file trees, sometimes they don't. I don't want to get into too many specifics this early, but those are typically the pillars or the way that we organize the investigation. Root point of compromise, number one. Impact of malware, number two. Unauthorized data access or exfiltration is number three. So Edith, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, now let me ask you both a question. Have you had clients who say, I don't need an investigation, I just want to recover? And what has been if so, what has been the outcome of that? Like, why is the investigation important?
So Byron, if you don't mind, I'll lead off with this. I have a story to share. I had a client who suffered a ransomware incident, and we were on a call with the lawyers, with the DFIR firm, which was myself and some colleagues, and then obviously the client themselves. And the client was very emotional and started yelling on the phone about how they did not want an investigation. They simply wanted to restore systems and be back up and running. The challenge with that, number one, is there's some empathy there. So I can understand that business operations have halted. They want to restore their business system so they can resume generating revenue for their business. Makes sense. The challenge is if you just restore systems without knowing what happened during the investigation, there's a very high likelihood that you are going to be, we call it re-encrypted. So the threat actor will come back in the same way they originally came back in and encrypt your systems again. So typically this can take, let's say it takes a few days to restore your systems. Remember, in a ransomware event, typically Windows Active Directory is compromised. Your domain admin accounts have been either compromised or new domain accounts have been created. So Active Directory is compromised. Main network functionality is down. DNS may not be working. It takes a few days to restore this. So if you take those few days and you restore, and then you re-encrypted, you're back to where you started, really without any progress. So we try to explain to clients how important these investigations are, how we move quickly, how we categorize into those three pillars, so that they can make informed decisions rather than those emotional decisions that say, I don't need an investigation. Byron?
Yeah, no, I think it's really important to point that out, that something that you mentioned, Aric. We need to know what really happened and how it happened. Because basically, when they don't want a investigation, they are pretty, well, they can get encrypted again. But the main question is for me, if they know if those backups are clean, if they are compromised or not. Because depending of that, it can lead to being encrypted again. And that data, it's really valuable for them. And as you said, one of the challenges that we have is to try to understand what the client is going through, because it's a really stressing time since they are down. All their business is down, they are offline, and they cannot keep their business going. And that results in a huge loss of money. But I think it's good to have that balance between like trying to recover and the investigation part, because if we don't know how or what happened, we are not sure in what time we can get encrypted again, or if we are clean on our environment. Yeah.
I like to equate it to a burglar who entered a business, right? Normally, if you think about a burglary, you think about how did they get in, right? And if you left a back door unlocked, you've got to figure out a way to make sure that the door is always locked. Otherwise, you're basically just telling the burglars, hey, this is how you can come in, right? So I hopefully we can continue to explain those to our clients, that investigations are necessary so that we can keep these burglars out. So sometimes I feel like analogies like those sometimes work, but we still have, sometimes the clients who just want to recover, and then, a week later, they're calling us back because they've been re-encrypted. So tell me, some of the other challenges that we have had, especially recently with some clients, either through experience or recent ones that you can think of, things that maybe you wish clients did a little bit better, or had they known. It's not that clients don't want to, it's they just don't know. They don't know what they don't know, right? So I'll start with you, Aric, see if you have any thoughts on some of those challenges.
Yeah, sure. So I think what happens with security incidents is there's a lot of ground to cover. There's a lot of areas that need attention, and we generally refer to that as your security stack, the maturity of your security stack. So to tie in our previous point, what you can learn from the investigation can help mature your security stack. I think that's the first point. The second point is when you start looking at your capabilities from a security perspective, you have to be very honest and not necessarily listen to what vendors are telling you. There's a lot of tools that can be installed that certainly can help, but those require a lot of tuning. Sometimes there's various packages that have to be purchased that maybe you didn't know about. So to remain vendor agnostic, you want to validate and test these systems rather than just listening or accepting at face value what the proposed capabilities are. I think that's one main point. A second that I see very often is logs. So we hear about logs all the time, and whether you have logs or don't have them. I think this goes in phases. So on the very immature side of a security stack, there should be a mechanism in your organization that allows you to offload logs using maybe even just syslog and have a repository of Windows event logs somewhere. That's very helpful because threat actors do remove or clear Windows event logs. I think as we move along that spectrum of maturity, looking at what information is being retained in those logs. So very often I see challenges where a client will say, well, I have network logs or I have a firewall log, and they send us the CSV. Within that particular log, it doesn't contain information that helps the investigation. So one of the recommended, and I very rarely see this talked about, but one of the recommendations we can give clients, first of all, is look at your logs and try to answer specific questions about those logs. Can you determine the source and destination IP address? Can you see a timestamp? Can you see a user account in those logs? What are you actually retaining? So that helps tremendously. That can make or break an investigation. So if the threat actor clears logs from a system itself, maybe there's another place we can go to look for said logs, but we need to have access and we have to make sure that the appropriate data is being stored there. A final point I want to make is there are a lot of frameworks out there that can help clients mature their security stack. And one of my favorites is really the CIS controls. So the CIS controls is a list of actionable items you can start embarking on in your organization, and that can help you formulate a security plan. So they changed a little bit throughout the years. Typically, it starts with a hardware and software inventory. Know what's in your environment, and then there's various steps that go on after that. But I think, again, challenges, one of the biggest challenges is certainly what is in your logs? How are you retaining those logs? And is the information in those logs actionable? Byron, you want to make comments maybe on backup and restoration?
Yeah, well, I wanted to make a comment then on what you said too, that we need access to data as fast as we can, because one of the most valuable assets that we all have, and more on these kind of cases, is time, since they are trying to recover in the least amount of time. And yeah, having that information available, it's really important, because we let the evidence guide us in all of the investigations. And there's a phrase that I really like, that a report on digital forensics is just data with a soul, because we try to make a understandable story based on what the evidence is telling us and what we can extract from there, because we have a lot of information, or even sometimes we don't have that information that can make our job more easy. And having that data and having those times available, it's really important for us. And yeah, coming back to backup restoration,
hold on, before you go to backup, you made a really good point, Byron, because not only the data is available to us, but we've come across clients who have the platforms with this data, but no one in their organization knows how to use that platform or how to offload that data to provide to us. So that can also be a challenge as well. You may have the correct tools in place, but if no one knows how to use those tools, it also can delay an investigation. That was one. And before you go over to backups and stuff, I also wanted to comment on something that Aric said initially in reference to some of the tools and stuff. Not having a tool, but it's not configured correctly, can also hinder an investigation, or we've had clients who have correct tools, but they haven't enabled certain things that could have helped them from getting to the point where they are now. They could have made it, I guess, a little bit more difficult for the threat actor to get in, right? So they would have had to jump through some more hoops. So those misconfigurations, or I guess those, not tuned correctly, can also change a case one way or the other. So wanted to make those 2 points, but go ahead, Byron.
Yeah. Thank you, Edith. I think your comments are really really insightful on all of what we are discussing. So coming back to backup restoration, there's different strategies that we can take part on and implement on our environments. There's the 3-2-1 backup strategy. I really like that because this strategy allows you to have different copies of your data on different I forgot the word in English. Sorry.
It's in Spanish. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah. Places. Sorry. You can have your data in different places, since you can have one on site, you can have one or two of those copies back in the cloud, or even you can have 1 kilometers away from your site and have it asegurado, insured in a different environment. But those strategies really depends on what the organization really wants. So one of the points that maybe we can take out from here is that a risk assessment is really important in all of the cybersecurity posture that a organization have. And yeah, backups are one of the main resources that we have against ransomware, because we don't want for it to keep going. Ransomware will keep going if we pay for those, and having backups that we can make use of is really important for us to try to stop those threat actors.
Yeah, so if I can also comment on backups real quick. We get asked this very often. So during a ransomware event, or a ransomware incident, what happens is your data is encrypted and the file extensions are changed. Most system files are left alone usually. So you can still log into the system is still online. However, most of the data there will be encrypted. So the question is, well, isn't it faster to just decrypt? Pay the threat actor, get the key, and decrypt? And the answer is no, it's actually not. Usually your backup solution will be much faster and more reliable, provided, as Byron mentioned earlier, that those backups are clean and not, or haven't been compromised by the threat actor. Byron, can you make any comments about authentication to backups and how sometimes a threat actor may utilize that authentication to manipulate or destroy backups?
Yeah, so we had a case recently when a threat actor, after encrypting some system, they went right to the backup server and they deleted everything. And not just that, they fill that empty space with a bunch of trash information, since they don't want for the organization to be able to recover, not even without those backups that they deleted, because there are some forensic techniques that can be applied to different hard drives or to recover the erased data. But when they did that, they overwrite, they basically made that data inaccessible. So having those tools and logged, as you said, Aric, authentication to those backup servers is really important, because it doesn't help us just to know who did what. They also prevent the threat actors to get into those servers and to destroy that data. And yeah, I don't know if you wanted to add something more about it.
Yeah, just one other point that we see pretty often is, okay, so we know now that backups are the quickest way to restore yourself out of a ransomware event. The threat actors also know this, so they try to access backup systems. again, another takeaway from this, in your organization, if you are using the same credentials to access your backup systems as you're using for domain admin, any other user accounts are shared, please stop that for your backup. Your backups should be completely separate. You should not be using Active Directory if you can help it. If you do use Active Directory, just be aware there are tools that threat actors use, credential harvesting tools, so they may see the passwords in use. That's typically what we see happen is the threat actor will gain admin rights, and then they will log into the backup system as your administrator and then destroy them. As Byron said, they overwrite data sometimes, so it's not possible or it's not feasible to recover that data that's been overwritten. And the reason this is because they're forcing you to purchase the decryption key, which it's not as straightforward as most people think. It takes a lot of time that decryption doesn't work. Think about a database that's running and then it is not shut down cleanly. So it's in a dirty state and it was encrypted. The recovery of that database is fairly low probability. It does happen. It's maybe 50-50 to be honest, but your restoration, your backup and restorations are your quickest, most reliable way to get yourself out of a ransomware event. Edith, any other comments on that?
Yeah, I think the only other comment is also if you're going to, first of all, have backups, right? But also practice on how to restore from those backups, we need to be up and running as fast as we can. We can provide as much support as possible, boots on the ground if needed. But essentially, as an organization should be prepared to restore from these backups. They should have practiced it, hopefully several times a year, but if not, at least once in case they do come through it. Because like you said, Aric, essentially, threat actors want to get paid for this key. The more we as a society pay for this, all we do is reinforce them to continue to encrypt and ask for ransom. So it works. It works for them if we as a society are paying for it. So we want to stay away from that behavior and be able to say, no, I don't need to pay, for this. I've got it. I can restore, pound send. And, but there's other things that come to it, of course, but other things to consider. But that's one of the main ones is be able to recover from your backups.
I just wanted to make a comment there too, since, we need to remember who is developing all these decryption tools. It's basically the same threat actors, and they don't really care for us to bring back what they have stole or maybe what is corrupted on our systems. So we need to keep an eye on our backups, since it's one of the most powerful tools that we have to recover. Yeah, just that.
Yeah, absolutely. Aric, now working over on mini/Central America cases compared to the U.S., any different types of, cases that you've had that is it the same type of cases, different type of cases? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I think it's about the same. I think what happens is there's stages to cybersecurity incidents, and those stages can be mitigated by standard security practices. So for example, if you have a particular firewall and you don't update that firewall and there are vulnerabilities that are being released, that's a very large gateway for threat actors to come in. And we see that both on the US side and even the Central and South American side. Patch management, vulnerability management, understanding what, let me back up. I think software inventory, we see a lack of knowing what is in the network. Consequently, then there's software that's running maybe on an edge device that's vulnerable. So I go back to the CIS controls and looking at hardware and software inventory management. Then we look at vulnerability management, identifying what software is vulnerable in your environment is helpful. And again, making sure your authentication methods for your backup systems are different than just your standard admin accounts. I think another takeaway for the audience is the best way to think about the capability that the threat actor has in your network is what capability does the domain admin have in your network? That is what the threat actor goes after, is some kind of admin account. Generally, it's domain admin, and they usually get it. And once they get it, they can do everything that your domain admin can do in your organization. So how do you mitigate against that? Well, there's various things you can do, but start thinking about your network, not from the perspective of it's someone from the outside coming in, but rather it's someone from the outside who now has admin access, and they want to put you in a position to pay for decryption. When we explain that to clients, whether that's in the US, Central or South America, you can see that light go on, or that understanding that this is not just an external attack being launched against our systems. This is really an internal attack. Granted, it's not generally an employee or an insider threat. It is an external threat actor, but it's very rarely thought about, or at least I've had a lot of conversations with clients who never think of it from the perspective of what happens if a bad actor, a threat actor, gets admin rights. Byron, any other comments? Sorry, Edith, go ahead.
Which just reminds me to a case that we worked several years ago, where everyone in this company, that was a global company, everyone in this company had admin rights. So everyone there had access. It was just mind-boggling to me, and made it a little bit difficult because everyone had these rights. So anyhow, just thought about this as you were saying that piece.
Yeah,
that's a not. Sorry, Byron. Just one more thought. That's a non-defensible network, and I think we have to be honest when we look at our implementation, our security stack. Is this network defensible? If everyone is an admin, there's nothing you can do about that. That's a losing situation. Sorry, Byron. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add that from what your experience that you have tell us here in the team, there are some different approaches in the US against the Latin American approach to cybersecurity, or even the what to do when an incident has happened on our environment. Since here on Latin America, I perceive it as sometimes as the organizations feel shame to admit that they have been compromised or breached. And I think we need to start to change that mentality, because if we try to be extremely careful with what we say to the public, I mean, there's of course different type of tiers of confidentiality of the information that the organization can disclose. But I think it's really important for the organizations to open up and be honest on what they have been going through, because working together on the good side, if we can say it like that, we help each other to make the cyberspace more secure, and we can work together to know different new tactics that the threat actors are using on the environments.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think there's a shift in the U.S. more so, just because, generally speaking, I think the maturity of the security stack in the U.S. for companies is generally a little bit farther along, because I think they've been targeted for longer. So I think the Central and South American population is starting to see or starting to experience what was successful in the U.S. from a threat actor perspective. And Byron, it's a great point. We see this all the time at security conferences. A lot of publications talk about sharing information as opposed to berating someone. Oh, I can't believe your organization was affected by whatever the incident happens to be. This happens all the time. It's becoming almost commonplace. And anything we can do to share information, share TTPs, collaborate, I think is certainly time well spent. We know for a fact that the threat actors do this on various forums and through leaked publications. There's always sharing that's happening. As a matter of fact, a lot of the encryption algorithms that are shared and the code is sourced between different threat actor groups. So we have to do a better job on the blue side of sharing information. Edith, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And not just sharing amongst companies, but across countries as well, across regions. Like one of the things that I personally notice is a lot of threat actor groups that we've come across on the central side. I reached out to some of my counterparts who were in the U.S. side, and I hadn't heard of that threat actor group yet, right? So is Central America sort of the breeding grounds for putting some tools and stuff together before they cross over to the U.S. side? Because then we see it, about a month or so later, we see some new cases on the U.S. side come across that we've experienced here on the Central America side. So sharing is really important as well across borders, which kind of takes me back, right? There's always been a comments have been made in the past. I think I've said it before too. Cybercrime has no borders at all. Any cybercrime will continue to be there in any country. The cybersecurity posture, cybersecurity strategies should also be borderless. Like it should continue across. What is being practiced that works in one country should also attempt to be adopted by other countries as well. So just as cybercrime has no borders, we need to be on the defensive side as well and the proactive side to make sure that we can be better prepared when an incident such as ransomware happens. All right. Any other thoughts from either of you?
I think just a few parting thoughts on my side is I always like to have some action items. I mean, these discussions are great, but what can we do in our organization today to mature our security stack and better position ourselves against a cybersecurity incident? So first is adopt some kind of framework. I would again recommend the CIS controls. Look them up, start with hardware and software inventory management. Beyond that, start making sure you have some type of log retention, whether it's using syslog or some tool that will take your high priority systems, take those logs and move them somewhere that they can be referenced later if they're ever lost and or destroyed. Third thing is if you have other logs like firewall logs or network devices, make sure that those logs are capturing relevant information that lets you answer questions, the who, what, where, when, why, maybe not why, but looking at source IPs, timestamps, user accounts, etc. Could you put together a story if you had just those logs? And then finally, and I apologize, Byron, I'm probably stealing some of your thoughts here, but finally is getting rid of or at least mitigate logins to your backup systems through Active Directory. Take those to local logins with different credentials that are not used anywhere. Again, your quickest way out of a specific ransomware event is to restore from your backups. So practice those. Byron?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that here in Latin America, cybersecurity as a whole is a really emerging thing, because we haven't have that approach yet. So the best we can do, I think, is to have a proactive, is to be proactive rather than just to react to what is happening to us. So as you said, making that risk assessment, inventory of not just hardware, even software that the organization has, and try to invest, but no, not to go to the biggest or the best of the best tools that there are available on the field. Is just to try to understand what really the organization needs and try to bring that thought onto the table and tell management, hey, this is something that is a matter of time. Is as well as on different conferences says, is not am I going to be breached, is when I'm going to be breached. So be prepared to respond to that and have the right tools and the right approach to these situations. I think is the best advice that we can give to different clients that maybe cannot afford for a service as some of the ones that are out there that are being offered, is that they need to understand and analyze what the business needs and try to make the most that they can with what they have.
Yeah, great points, Byron. Well, I think that concludes our Cyber Caffeine for today. Thank you both for joining and for bringing your thoughts together. It's always great to have these type of conversations. Thank you. Next one.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.